Hey y'all, 'tis the season for holiday parties, and tonight I have another holiday party to go to. Without further chatter, let's get right into creating the holiday makeup look. I've already prepped and primed my skin. It's a nighttime party, so that means no sunscreen. For my primer, I've used a multi-priming step. The first primer I used was for the forehead, nose, and then front of the cheeks, where my pores are a little bit larger, and I used the e.l.f. Poreless Priming Putty. Looks like this. You can see mine's well loved. For the perimeter of my face to add a little bit more smoothing and a little bit of luminosity, I used the Guerlain Meteorites base. This is really lovely because it has these little pink pearls, which as you rub and blend them, they take on a very pearly, cool toned sheen. It gives you a little bit of smoothing, a little bit of a plumping, and a little bit of an icy glow. For the under eye area, I used the Jaclyn Cosmetics. This is the Hydrating Under Eye Primer. Smooths out the under eyes and adds a little extra plump and juice to the area. And no holiday priming routine, for me at least, is complete without dousing my skin in some type of skin mist. I started by using the Physicians Formula Essence of Healthy Mist, and then I followed it up with the MAC Prep and Prime Fix Plus. I used the Rose, but I like this because it has a nice glycerin base. I'm going to be using a powder foundation, which this will help it to have a little bit more slip, a little bit more glide, and it'll make it look less powdery. With my shirt that I'm wearing tonight having a higher neckline, I really want to play up the shape of my face because I'm losing the elongation of my neck, putting a lot of emphasis on my face, and I feel like my face just looks very long and ovular, if that's even a word. Starting off with the Auric Glow List. This is in Morganite. This is the second iteration of Morganite. When I'm choosing the areas that I want to apply it, I want to think about the areas of my face that I want to bring forward. I want to have the most visual interest. So for me, that is top of the cheekbone. With my face being a little bit longer than it is wide, I want to add a little bit of width to my face. And I find the width, for me at least, is the most flattering here at the cheekbone. A little bit on the chin to play up the roundness of the chin. Doing this, I find, in combination with a little bit of sculpting around the jawline. In my case, I have facial hair, but if you put a little bit of light on the chin and then pair it with contour on the jawline, it will give you a little bit more jawline definition, make the lower face look a little bit more shapely. And then on the nose, just to draw a little bit of light into the center plane of the face. If you're someone who subscribes to the facial thirds, which is where you'll go hairline to brow, brow to nose, and then nose to chin. With that mindset, you want all three of those areas to be proportional to each other, meaning one area is no larger or smaller than the other areas. My forehead is the longest of my thirds, throwing off the overall balance of facial thirds, which it's not a big deal. I mean, for me, I don't really care. But when I'm losing the elongation of my neck, I want to play up the different zones of my face, as we could say, and create more visual harmony. Wherever we have light or brightness, we need to add some depth and shadow to really play up that three-dimensional effect. I'm going to be using the Fenty Beauty Cheeks Out Freestyle Cream Bronzer in 01 Amber, which is a cool toned cream contour. I like this because it's quite gray, and for my skin tone, it gives me the most realistic looking contour. My contour, I'm gonna go right under the highlight and go more vertical. Back and forth, back and forth. I like to stop my contour at the outer corner of my eye. That way it doesn't drag down the middle of my face, looking things look a little bit droopy. I like to keep things lifted, wider set. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I'm doing a very elliptical motion. Pull it back into the hairline, and then once I have less product in my brush, I'm going to lift up a little bit, creating a very soft triangular shape. That way I'm still getting from the front on view the more straight effect, but from the side it's going to give me a little bit of a lift. I'm going to add some shape to my nose. I like to tie it into the front of the eyebrow. That way it's going to add a little bit of length to my nose, because once again, going back to those facial thirds, for my nose to be in that proper positioning or length to the rest of my face, my nose is a little bit too short as far as the length. So I want to create an illusion of a longer nose. I want to keep things pretty straight, and by tying it into the front of the brow, it creates more of a straight line going down. And I'm gonna take a little bit right here on the outer corner of the nostril where they flare. I'm gonna go back to my larger brush, and I want to reduce the length of my forehead. So far, I have only prepped my skin and primed it, and then I've added some highlight. I'm doing a technique that we call underpainting. Underpainting is great if you want your contour or sculpting process to be a little bit more subtle. Because let's face it, if you do a heavy contour and you go out in natural light, or someone takes a picture of you from the side, or sometimes it doesn't have to be a picture, it just has to be seeing someone with your own eyes, but they turn their head to their side and they have this line. That is the tricky thing with doing contour on an everyday basis. Unless you were expert at finding your shade and blending it, a lot of times we'll get these lines. With underpainting, we're applying everything under foundation and concealer. That way, when you apply those over it, you're gonna get that subtle suggestion, the shaping, which makes it feel and look a little bit more natural. Now, today, I'm gonna be using a powder foundation. I'm gonna do my concealing now, and that will also help play into that three-dimensional effect that we are going for with creating that reshaped effect to my face. Concealer I'm gonna use is the Kosas Revealer Concealer in shade 1.5C. With this shade, I don't want to add too much concealer because I'm going to use a few different colors of concealer to create the effect I want. Since this one has a little bit more of a creamy finish, I'm going to use this where my under eyes tend to be the driest, and this shade is also a little bit darker. So any of those areas I want to further recede, I'm going to apply it right there. I've mentioned this in other videos, but what I love about this concealer is it will eventually dry down and start to self-set. When it has this nice creaminess, since part of the name is like creamy daytime eye cream or something along that nature. Very long title, but it gives you time to work with it. And I'm going to use another Real Technique setting brush. This one is clean. Normally parties, at least like this holiday party, it's at a friend's apartment. It's a smaller space. There's a lot of people. It gets very warm. Things can melt, things can move, things can migrate. Keep it thin. Spread it out as far as you can, and then add a little bit more where you need it. That will help keep things looking more flawless for longer. Once I blend with my brush, just to be safe, I like to take my finger and pat over everything. This way, it will help to further spread everything out because our brush is quite soft, it's quite fluffy. It will glaze things. And by using your finger and pressing over, you can use the emollients or the slip of the product to further spread, make sure everything is blended. For areas where I have a little bit more darkness or I need a little bit more coverage to create that effect, I'm gonna use a concealer that is a little bit lighter, a little bit brighter with a little bit more opacity. That's a lot of little bits. And the concealer that I'm using is the Tarte Shape Tape Ultra Creamy Concealer in the shade 12B or Fair Beige. Now, for this step, I like to use the benefit of two different mirrors. So normally when you're doing your makeup, you will have a large stationary mirror. Use that to look far away. I've said in another video, I like to sit or set back as far as I can and look through, find where I can see shadowing. Then use a little handheld mirror and look up close and see how that's going to look. I'm going to take a little bit of this slightly brighter concealer on the inner corner of my eye, and instead of using this flat side of the doe foot applicator, I like to use the point. That will allow me just to get the smallest amount of product. Putting a lighter color in like the nasolabial fold or any type of fine line or wrinkle, a lower point and then a higher point, you have to be careful. If you use too much product and then pull it out too far, and it can end up making things look worse than they were beforehand. I'm gonna use a smaller, stiffer brush. This is the Sonia G Soft Concealer, and I'm gonna start by using the point of this brush to press. We're not concentrating too much on blending, no. I'm just pressing that pigment. Then I'm gonna use my previous concealer brush, which is the Real Technique setting brush. Keep my motions a lot smaller and then press it over with my finger to further blend. That step alone has helped to add a lot of brightness, but now it's almost feeling like this inner portion of the eye is blown out. That's okay. We are going to add our foundation on top, and that will make everything look more balanced. It will make things feel more shapely visually. I'm going to use one more concealer. This is the e.l.f. Hydrating Camo Concealer. I'm using the shade Fair Rose. This is a little too light, too bright for me. This will make a great highlighter. First and foremost, we want to scrape off all of that extra product. We just need a teeny tiny bit. Find the lowest points of the face. For me, that's right there. I'm gonna add a little bit of there just to highlight. Dot here, dot here. I want a little bit more lift here, here, and a little bit of more volume right here. I'm gonna use the Sonia G brush again. I want less color payoff here, so I'm gonna blend this first. As your liquid and cream concealers set on the skin, some of the emollient starts to dissipate, you will get a little bit more coverage. Dots all over the face. Think about where you want the most coverage. For me, that's gonna be around the eye area. I'm gonna blend those last and then work my areas of lowest concern to highest concern. That would be my chin, followed by the nose, then the glabellar area or between the eyebrows, and then the eyes. Now our fluffier concealer brush, we are gonna whisk and blend. I want things to be lifted, so I'm angling my brush on the lower lash line towards the tail of the brow. And when I get to the temple area, I'm gonna blend straight back towards my hairline. For my foundation, I'm going to be using an Old Reliable, and it's the foundation I used on my wedding day because at that moment, I've talked about it in the wedding makeup video I shared, I didn't know what to do and I just wanted something I could trust. That was easy. I used the Bare Minerals Matte Foundation. I used the shade Fair 01. I love the Bare Minerals foundation, but it can be fussy. A lot of people use way too much product. The way I like to do this is open the sifter to where there's only 3 little holes showing and then take a little bit of product in the lid. That little bit of product here is all you need. It's kind of hard to see because my lid is stained, but working products from the lid is going to help you buff everything in. I'm using a small brush. This is the BK Beauty number 106, and just like Bare Minerals taught us and the infomercials, we are going to swirl, and I like to do a mix of counterclockwise as well as clockwise. We are going to tap, and they say buff. I like to stipple all over where I applied liquids and creams to my face. I want to stipple the product in and then I will buff. Stippling my products in will help set everything down and prevent them from moving. So that way when I go to buff, things won't move around and go places other than where I put them. For me to do that pressing technique all over my entire face, I took 3 of those small amounts of the powder and stippled one here, one on the other cheek, one on the forehead. I'm gonna take a tiny bit more. Once again, swirl my brush in, tap off the excess. Now I'm gonna buff. I like to start in the first quadrant where we started, which for me is my left cheek. I go right over my eyes to create a base for my eyeshadow, and I start buffing it into the skin. You'll notice compared to normal, I'm holding my brush down a little bit further. I want to really press my brush and product into the skin, but you don't want to jab it into the face. It's pressed firmly, but it's not rough. You're still not causing the bristles to splay like this. You're just pressing to where you have contact with the skin. Other videos where I've used this foundation, I've said I really, really love this foundation. That stays true. I have loved this foundation for years, much like the Laura Geller pressed powder foundation that I really love. This is another product that my Grammy and my mom used for years, from the early 2000s when the Bare Minerals infomercials first hit the TV. I felt like they started using it there. I'm sure they got it off QVC. They used it, and then I remember for school picture days, my mom, who was much darker than I am, and she's warmer. So if we think to seasonal color analysis, which has just become my big obsession of 2022, I am a light summer and my mom is a warm true autumn, and her skin tone is darker and warmer than mine. My little fair-skinned self back in high school when I was struggling with acne, I would always go into a panic before school picture day. I would have 5 new blemishes and I would not want my picture to be taken. So my mom and I would sit down and then she would very sparingly use a little bit of her foundation and concealer just to even out the areas. And I don't know if either of us knew then, but her color did not work for me. And the Bare Minerals, I wear shade Fair. And then if I'm not mistaken, my mom wore medium beige or just medium. Can't recall. I think it was medium beige, because medium beige is a neutral undertone. And it is quite a bit darker than me. I mean, it's darker than the shade I use now as a contour product or a product that uses a subtle bronzer. And there's a few pictures that if I could ever remember to find them, I would take a picture of them because they're all at my parents' house and share with you. But you could still see the blemishes, they were just a darker skin tone, almost like hyperpigmentation. So bless my mom. She tried her best and she was being so helpful. And that is something that I look back now with just the most fond memories. And it's like, oh wow, that's something we really did together. It is one of those memories that I would not trade for the world because it's just so special now. We've got our powder foundation on. So here is the Bare Minerals Matte Foundation shade Fair 01 up close buffed into the skin. I want to make things extra radiant and I want this to look more like a cream. I'm going to use my Physicians Formula Essence of Healthy Mist. You know when to stop spraying when you feel like you've got enough on, but give it a few more sprays. That's good. Now I'm going to go back to MAC Fix Plus because this has a glycerin base. Glycerin's a humectant, so it's going to pull moisture in. And Bare Minerals, when it interacts with moisture on the skin and it warms up, it takes on more of a creamy effect versus a powdery effect. I want to help expedite that process. MAC Fix Plus. Once you feel like you've got enough, spray one more time. Now, I'm not totally sure what I want to do with my eyes. I know I want something a little bit more glamorous and a little bit more dramatic than my typical makeup looks, but I'm not sure how I want to achieve that. This is from Tarte's sister brand, Sugar Rush, and this is the Sweet Tarte Frosted Palette, and it has a mix of mostly cool tones with a few little punches of warmth. We are going to use this to play and figure out what happens together. BK Beauty A501 Flat Packing Brush with the shade Buttercream. This shade has a little bit more pink than my skin tone right now, which will help to brighten up the overall look. I love this palette so much that I sent it to a friend. The way she summarized the color story is very reminiscent of some of the K-Beauty eyeshadows that I really love. But K-Beauty eyeshadows tend to be a little bit more sheer. They tend to have less upfront pigment, whereas this one has a very similar color palette, but the pigment is a little bit more Western, meaning you get a more bang for your buck up front, which means if you want to create something in a rush, this might be a better option for you as you don't have to build as much. BK Beauty A502 Indulgence, which is a mid-tone mauve or mauve. First thing I want to do is start with a little bit here in the socket to start receding the hooded area of my eyelid, extending it a little bit. So I'm going to use very light hand, very gentle wipes, go to the tail of my eyebrow, and then pull a straight line from the tail of my brow back to my socket. Pull the shadow up just a pinch. This particular color is going to be a little bit more sheer. Think of this as our stencil. The BK Beauty A504 Decadent, which is a little bit more of a red violet shade. This has a bit more punch, so I want to use this very sparingly. I'm going to concentrate this here on the very outer corner of my eye. And I want to focus on the round, so you can use your finger or the end of your brush. Gently press around the eye. Feel where the round of the ball of your eye is, and that is where I want to apply this color. Looking straight ahead, you'll find this point here, but sometimes we want that to be a little bit more intense. I like to use a light hand, a little bit more product, and start to very lightly sketch that shape. Go back to my previous brush and very gently manipulate the shadow back and forth. Decadent and Soufflé, a dark red brown with a slightly cooler undertone and that red violet shade. You've got to kind of play with your angle. For me, I find not to tilt my chin all the way up, but almost like a halfway between tilting it up and being neutral. That halfway point to create a winged shape. Pick up more product in my brush, and then just before the point, I'm going to pull this down. And I like to angle it towards the outer corner of the iris. And now I'm just going to fill it in. Right now we have a little bit of a disconnect between that darkest color and where we place the flake. We're going to now go back with that smaller brush, the A504. I'm going to concentrate on the inner line and gently wiggle my brush side to side. And we can use that to marry together these two shades. Now we've got them connected, but our liner shade still has a little bit more impact. I've kind of stopped working on this side, and that's something I do a lot, freestyling or creating a look that I'm not sure where to go. I'll do bits of back and forth, but when I'm kind of in the groove right here, I will think about what I want to do and just finish this side and then go to this side. If you're someone who has trouble remembering what you did here, what color you used here, what technique, do this side, then do this side right away. Temptation, and I'm gonna use the BK Beauty A505, which is a flat synthetic brush. This shade, I want to tilt my chin up, look down, because this sparkly shade can have some fallout. I'm gonna press it starting at the lash line, pulling up to the socket color that we applied. And the trick I like to do, we did not apply that darkest shade, the socket on this side. I like to mirror that shape I created with this more light medium shimmer shade. Use that mid-size brush and blend over my edges. This is gonna have a little bit of that residual product that we've been using on the other place in the eye, so we can use this to help blend the shades together and create more harmony. I'm loving this so much. I'm using the shade Sugar Coated at the bottom, which is almost like a soft pewter with a little bit of a pink to it. And I'm gonna use this on the very inner corner of my eye. Press and wiggle, and then pull in the direction I wanna take the shadow. When you press the brush and kind of wiggle back and forth and then pull, it's going to help really adhere your glitters and shimmers to the eye. A lot of times glitters and shimmers, especially ones with larger particles, they're more prone to falling down. And we've already done our foundation, we've done our concealer. We don't want everything to fall down. So that's when you could do your eyes first. But sometimes I need the base to be done for these more dramatic looks so I can see how everything's going to play together. On this side, I tried another little trick just to kind of create something with a little bit more of a haziness to it. What I'm going to do is use the BK Beauty A502 dot of Decadent, a dot of Indulgent, and then tap into this orange shade at the bottom called Fresh Baked. Up here we're using cooler tones. Here's a warmer shade. It's a complementary shade of purple. It's going to create something a little bit more neutral as the two shades will neutralize each other. Re-enhance this outer V shape. Then use the BK Beauty A503, a large fluffy brush that I've been keeping clean, and blend. I think one more point I want to do is I'm going to take a little bit of Soufflé and the BK Beauty 208. I'm going to use this to line the upper inner corner of my eye. Tap over with my finger just to soften everything out. I love that because it just helps to give the eyes a longer effect, which will once again help to add more visual width to the face. Let's add a little bit of glow to the face. For highlight, I'm going to be using a product from Charlotte Tilbury. This was limited edition. I'm not sure if it's still around, but pretty pinky rose gold highlight. There's tons of them on the market. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk Multi Glow in Romance Light. Mix all of the shades together, high on the cheekbone, and buff this in. This is going to be a little bit warmer and a little bit darker than I would normally use as a highlight. It's going to play off the tone of the eyes. To add that pop of brightness, I'm going to take my brush and go just into the light whitish shade and use this here as a very high point, almost blending it right under my eyeliner to add that pop of color. This highlight is really pretty. I can't say it's my favorite highlight, especially for day-to-day wear. I find it's a little too shiny and emphasizes my skin texture, but at night for a party when things are a little bit more dim, we can get away with that. This would not be one of my recent tutorials if we didn't start layering blushes. I'm going to use a shade from the brand 3CE. This is the 3CE Face Blush in the shade City Mauve or Mauve. I like to say both because some people say it one way, some say it the other. Real Techniques Blush Brush. I'm going to start a little bit further back and then wrap forward. The Wake Blush in number 3, if I'm not mistaken, this is called Lavender Delight, and BK Beauty number 107, Buff Along the Seam. I love these little blushes. They are not the most pigmented. That's something with K-Beauty in general. I find a lot of the powder products, they are a little bit more sheer. That tends to be a little bit more the general style, but the way they smooth out skin texture is like none other. They are so beautiful. So smooth. I find the price is better than a lot of mid-range brands here in North America. The colors for me, my skin tone, my preferences, I like because a lot of them are a little bit more muted Some of them are more on the warm side, but there are some cool tones, and a lot of their cool tones, they almost feel more neutral. There's a sense of neutrality, which I feel like makes them a lot more wearable for more people. The tip of my nose is looking a little too shiny, not my style. Using my finger to soften that down. Okay, I want a pop of color. The Laura Mercier Color Infusion Blush in the shade Rose. Let's put on some mascara. I'm using my Mood Curling Mascara in brown. With the look being a little bit more dramatic, a little bit more spicy on the eyes, I want to keep the lips a little bit more nude, a little bit more muted, but I don't feel like I pull off the overly beigey nude lip anymore. We are going to hack it. I am going to use the MAC lip pencil in the shade Soar. This on its own, for me, is not going to be really a nude. This is going to be a little bit more of a rosy tone. But we're going to try putting the NARS lipstick in Cruising on top, which is more of a sheer pink beige with a silver sparkle. That's a really pretty combo. Not quite what I was looking for, so I'm going to blot this down. I'm going to use NARS Raw Love, which is a matte lipstick, and it is a color I struggle with, but I have an idea. Still don't like it. I'm gonna use Bobbi Brown Luxe lipstick in the shade Pale Mauve. Now I'm gonna use a little bit more of NARS Cruising as like a gloss. Pinch more Soar to define the edge. Alrighty, I really like how this turned out. I'm gonna use a tiny bit more setting spray. CoverGirl Clean Fresh Pressed Powder in number 100 Translucent, just to mattify some of my shiny areas. I'm gonna tone down that highlight a little too much for me. And that is going to complete this makeup look. This is my bigger, more extravagant, smoky party look. This is great for like a holiday party or even a New Year's party. I might do something similar to this in New Year's with a little bit more smoky, rich colors. That would be a lot of fun. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I am going to figure out what to do with my hair and figure out what jacket to put on with this shirt because it's sheer and I can like feel air going right through it. So it's gonna be cold tonight and I need something a little bit warmer. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel for more fun makeup content, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care of yourself wherever it is you are in the world, and I will see you later. Happy holidays, y'all.